The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
The provincial government didn't want students to miss in-class learning. That prompted legislation invoking the notwithstanding clause that even Premier Ford today called controversial. That bill is now due to be rescinded. But tonight, we'll explore whether it nonetheless means a precedent-setting shift in labor rights. Then, as the Royal Canadian Legion's Poppy campaign flourishes ahead of Remembrance Day, we'll check in on how legions across Ontario work to stay relevant. It's Monday, November 7th, and that's next on The Agenda. What's commonly called the notwithstanding clause was long called the nuclear option in Canadian constitutional parlance. It refers to Section 33 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, adopted in 1982. It allows the federal and provincial governments to override rights laid out in the Charter. The Ontario government included this clause last week in its legislation imposing a contract on education workers represented by CUPE, the Canadian Union of Public Employees, and making their subsequent job action illegal. For 36 years, no Ontario government ever used the notwithstanding clause. Premier Doug Ford has used it twice and threatened to use it once more. He's now set to rescind the bill using it in this case, but could this episode nonetheless lead to a shift in labor rights in Canada? Let's get into that. We're going to ask in St. Catharines, Ontario, Alison Brayley-Ratai, Associate Professor of Labor Studies at Brock University. And here in our studio, Catherine Marshall, employment lawyer at Levitt Shake, and Cynthia Mulligan, journalist and political specialist at City News. And it's great to have you two here in our studio. And to Professor Brayley-Ratai in Points Beyond, thank you for joining us as well. I understand, am I allowed to say this, Alison? You got COVID, so you're a trooper for being with us tonight. Thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you.
Cynthia, characterize, if you would, what happened today.
Well, there was a showdown that has been brewing ever since the government introduced this legislation. The union's power was growing. They were banding together. And today, this morning, the Ford government backed down.
You've covered a few press conferences in your time.
Yes, I have.
Have you ever been to one where there were probably 24, if not more, labor leaders at the top showing significant solidarity?
That was the biggest show of labor force I've ever seen in memory. Definitely.
Okay. Catherine, characterize in your view what happened today.
I would characterize it a little differently. The Ford government gave an offer that was accepted by the union. So the union is obviously going to frame it as, oh, they backed down. I mean, they've got to do that in order to save face. But I mean, from a strictly legal point of view, an offer was made and that offer was accepted. And I think what we really saw this morning was a cumulation of a very heated political situation that ended with a ceasefire.
But in your view, it was the Ford government offering an olive branch that has us where we are now.
Yes.
That's how it started. Okay. Alison Brayley-Ratai, I'd like to get your take on what happened today.
Certainly. Well, I am perplexed by Catherine's comment that the Ford government made an offer that the union accepted. Perhaps we'll have to come back to revisit that because that's perplexing to me. What I saw happen today was the Ford government overplayed its hand. It had spent too much of its time listening to its lawyers explain to it how it could get away with this draconian legislation legally, didn't spend nearly enough time listening to people who ought to have been telling it, this is a bad idea. It realized it was a bad idea. It realized it did not have the support, not only not of labor, but of much of civil society in this province, including parents of the very children that are at issue here. And it, as I think Cynthia said, it blinked.
Okay, Alison, when I hear people on this program use the word perplexing, usually that's a synonym for what in heaven's name are you smoking? Is that what you're trying to say here?
Yes.
Okay. She doesn't seem to agree with your characterization of how things went down today.
Yeah, to be putting it mildly. I mean, look, I negotiate for a living, so I can tell you, look, negotiation is a lot of posturing. It is, almost entirely posturing, actually. I mean, the union today, they could have counter offered to the government, hey, we actually want you to rescind your legislation. We're not stopping our job action, and we want to go back to the bargaining table now. But they didn't. And I think it's because they knew that the government was not going to let them continue with their strike. They knew that going into it, and I think they were always banking on the government not allowing them to be off the job and going into a binding arbitration or something like that. So I actually think it was the union that overplayed their hand, and they could have counteroffered. They didn't. So I think that speaks some volume.
May I interrupt? May I jump in here? What was lost in both news conferences really today were parents and children. And really, parents want their children back in school, particularly after COVID, when they have suffered a lot of learning loss. They haven't been in the classroom enough. And I think that both sides neglected to really put the children forefront, but both sides both know they will lose favor with voters if they aren't seen as doing everything they can to get kids back in school.
Well, the initial poll, Cynthia, showed that the public was more on the side of the unions than on the government side.
Right. So to me, the union had to do what it did this morning or this afternoon and say, yes, we'll go back into school. Yes, we will take Doug Ford's offer that is now in writing. Because if they didn't and they still stayed on the strike lines, they would lose support of parents.
But if I may, but why wouldn't they have? Of course, that was the whole point.
True.
Yeah. So fair enough. I get a little frustrated, and I'm not with you, Cynthia, or anything of that nature. But this sort of attempt to equalize the unions with the government, because of course the minister is formally a player in these particular negotiations because of the School Collective Bargaining Act, and this idea that unions, of course, they have power, obviously. Ain't no power but the power of the people. But at the end of the day, they were facing legislation. So legislation that was going to prevent their strike, or attempt to anyway, an imposition of a contract. Section 33, plain silly bugger with some of the provisions of the Ontario Labour Relations Act in order to insulate them against some of the unfair practice claims that might have been made against them. Draconian fines that are way above the caps that are actually in the Ontario Labour Relations Act. So, I mean, it's good to know that the government cares about inflationary pressures when it suits them. I just think that there are all sorts of things that were going on here that the government has the levers over. And so the only recourse, of course, we know this is, basic labor 101. The only lever that the union has is to use its strike option. And it gave its notice to strike, and the government, of course, overreacted. Obviously, parents and children matter. And of course, whether they should have, more play in the last few days, I suppose that's a matter of debate. But I also would remind us that when it comes to public sector unions, again, Labor 101, their working conditions are our children's learning conditions. So when they're trying to hold the line, not just for things like wages, but when they're trying to hold the line on things like staffing and support so that there are enough EAs and ECEs and so forth in the classrooms, that short-term pain has a long-term payout for children and parents and civil society as well. And I think that sometimes doesn't get enough play in this conversation either.
Okay, I want to pluck one thing out of what you just said, Alison, and put it to Catherine, namely this notion of the preemptive use of the notwithstanding clause of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in order to suspend rights that workers in this province have traditionally thought they had. Can you tell me whether you thought that was advisable for the Ford government to have done that?
So that's a really good question. And I just, to sort of give some context to what I'm going to say, I think just picking up on something that you mentioned was that, look, this is not short-term pain when kids have been out of school for 2 years. And I think the context of the fact that millions of kids have not had an education and have been in and out of school for 2 years and are very delayed and behind is the important context to looking at what it is the Ford government did. Had COVID not happened, I have no doubt the Ford government wouldn't have taken this move.
The move of threatening to use
Exactly. I completely agree. It's an extreme measure. It's not one to be used lightly. The clause is obviously there to be used in certain situations, and I think this is one of them that called for it because at the end of the day, I have a child in the public system. I mean, it is not okay that our kids are not in school. They have rights, and the most important stakeholders in all of this aren't at the bargaining table, which is kids and their parents. They're the ones suffering the biggest consequence when there's strike. They're not in school, they're not learning, they're getting behind, they're not having that. For a lot of kids, school is safety, it's where they get food, it's where they get social development. And we can't pretend like they haven't been severely, probably the most impacted by COVID out of anyone.
Well, let's
right?
stipulate everybody wants the kids back in school. The question is, how do we get from A to B? So,
Yeah.
Cynthia, let me put that to you. The notion of the preemptive use of the notwithstanding clause, as you analyze this, how problematic was that in terms of this story?
Well, I think it was problematic because I don't think that the Ford government properly messaged that it was justified. And, the opposition pointed out regularly all last week that this wasn't written overnight. Clearly, this legislation had been planned for some time. And in fact, on the very night of Ford's re-election, somebody from, a conservative insider suggested to me, what he's going to do is make teachers, the education sector, an essential service. So something along these lines have been buzzing since June. And I did ask somebody within the Ford government, why didn't you just make them an essential service? This wouldn't have been so messy.
Which basically means take away the right to strike.
Yes.
Your essential service.
And what they said was, it takes too long, and then an arbitrator gets involved, and they tend to get higher pay. And they didn't want to lose that control. So this was the second plan. I do think that they were looking initially for quite some time at making them an essential service. And somebody pitched to the Premier and the government that this is a great option.
Alison, I have had a number of emails from people saying, why didn't they just farm the whole thing out to binding arbitration? And would you acknowledge that one of the reasons the Ford government didn't want to do that is that they see that as a kind of a pro-labor process where the settlements tend to come in at levels higher than what governments are prepared to pay for?
Absolutely. So there are a couple of things here that I think are worth unpacking. And the first one is with respect to Catherine, again, the misleading claim that Section 33 had anything to do with the avoidance of disruption. I certainly think we could understand that there might be a government that genuinely does respect these workers. I don't think it's this government, but certainly one could. I think there are genuinely governments that do respect collective bargaining. I don't think this one does, but I think one could. And one can certainly envision a government genuinely having to grapple with this idea of children who, I think you're absolutely right, Catherine, should be in school, that absolutely have suffered and continue to suffer, by the way, because of COVID and lack of measures in schools, but that's a panel for another day. I think we can absolutely envision that. I think it's absolutely, and in that case, they could have grappled. They might have said, okay, back to work legislation, which is what would have legally taken care of the disruption piece, right? It's the other stuff. It's the imposition of a contract, which of course I think is absolutely true, Stephen. It's in order to avoid the fact that they would have gotten a objective shake in front of an independent arbitrator. And then the Section 33 piece, and I disagree entirely, and I've been doing this in interviews all week, trying to get people to understand that the Section 33 piece was simply about insulating the government 2, 3, and 4 years down the road from the inevitable charter challenge that they almost assuredly would have lost. It had nothing to do with avoiding this particular disruption, which they could have done way short of what they actually did.
Okay, let me come at this from a different direction, which is to say, this is a public sector union situation here, Cynthia. CUPE is a public sector union. But at that news conference today, which you said was the biggest thing you'd ever seen in terms of labor solidarity coming together, there were public sector and private sector unions up there. How significant do you think the private sector unions being prepared to go to bat for their public sector brothers and sisters, how big a factor was it all of this?
I think it was huge. I think that there was a lot of pressure on this government. And then don't forget, you had the Prime Minister weighing in. And those two have had a very good relationship for a long time, since COVID really began. And here's the Prime Minister using very strong language and encouraging Canadians to stand up against this. So I think that the pressure was immense on the Ford government. I think he underestimated CUPE. I think that it's not a smaller union, but it's not as loud as the teachers' unions tend to be. They carry more punch. And I think that they thought that this was going to quiet this union down and set an example for the teachers' union. And I think they miscalculated.
Because the way I, excuse me, the way I looked at it was they've spent the last 4 years really building a lot of bridges to those private sector unions.
Indeed.
And took 8 seats away from the NDP in the last election as a kind of a thank you from those private sector unions.
I'm sure the Labour Minister, Monty McNaughton, is not very happy about all the work that he's done that has been undone.
So you do believe that a lot of that work was at risk had this continued?
I do.
Catherine, does that make sense to you?
Well, I think there's a huge difference between public sector and private sector unions. The bargaining positions are very, very distinct. Like with private sector unions, they have a lot more considerations. Like they obviously, you don't see these like en masse strikes because if they do a work stoppage, I mean, their employer could go bankrupt and then they won't have jobs. So you have so that's why you see a lot more of these things happen in the public sector. I'm not surprised to see some private sector unions showing their support to the public sector unions today. But I don't think it's degraded, like what the government has done, I don't think has degraded the work that, I know Minister McNaughton has done for private sector unions. But I think fundamentally, when we look at what did the Ford government really do, I think they were conveying a message to public sector unions, primarily the teachers' unions, that if you guys want to bargain, you better come to the table fairly. And if we look at really what was on the table here with QP, 11.7% each year for 4 years, a strike option. Like I can tell you if you're in negotiation and someone tables a threat, there's nothing more that will kill a negotiation than tabling a threat. You can't have good faith bargaining when one side is threatening something extreme. You just can't.
All right, well, Alison, let's go up to 30,000 feet here, as the expression goes, and have you tell us whether, in your judgment, anything that has transpired in the last 24, 48 hours has changed the way bargaining is going to happen in this province going forward. What do you think?
Well, I think two things. The first thing I would like to say, though, because of what Catherine just said about the threat killing a negotiation, workers have the legal right to serve notice of intent to strike. It's part and parcel of the legislation that is given to them by the legislature. So in order to give that intent, and then for the government to then say, if you keep that intent on the table, we are going to not negotiate with you, that's a violation of the Ontario Labour Relations Act in Section 17, which requires, as Catherine did point out, both parties to negotiate in good faith. So really what's happening here, or what's happened here, is that the government broke unlawfully, Ontario Labour Relations Act by engaging in an act of bad faith, which is an unfair labor practice. So I do think it's really important that when we talk about a threat, the threat to strike is not a threat in the kind of way that would then justify what the government did. The government is the one who made the unfair labor practice. So I think that is really important. Otherwise, absolutely, I think the tenor has changed a little bit. If the government had done something even a week ago, very different from what it ended up doing, I think it could have gotten away with things that it couldn't now do. It couldn't tomorrow, for instance, send them to binding arbitration, I don't think, the way it might have been able to get away with even a week ago. So I think it shot itself in the foot. I think Cynthia is absolutely right that, I think it was Cynthia who said this, my apologies, that other conservative leaders and other, leaders in other provinces are paying attention. I think this was a big fight back for Labour, public and private, and I think that the government will not be able to do tomorrow what it might have been able to do this time last week.
I am curious, Cynthia, about who the ultimate target of the way the government has conducted itself over the last week is. I mean, CUPE is the one they're dealing with right now. Mm-hmm. But do you have any doubt that there was a broader message being sent to teachers here as well?
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. And I also think, though, the government was also paying attention to parents. I mean, like it or not, there have been a lot of labor disruptions in schools over the last how many years? 20 years, worked rules. It seems to be a constant theme, regardless of the government. And I think the Ford government was going to send a very strong message that we are not going to tolerate this and wanted to put an end to it. I think that was the goal, is just to put an end to labor disruption in the schools.
In which case, now that they have rescinded Bill 28 and they have said at their earliest opportunity they're going to nix it and go back to the bargaining table, what kind of signal does that now send?
Well, It's a really good question, how this plays. And will they end up giving the unions more money than they had anticipated just to make this quietly go away?
It's kind of the way it usually works, isn't it? You pay for labor peace at some point.
You pay for labor peace.
Yeah.
You know, I think what is missing in this conversation is how much do we think these jobs are worth, like really worth. And I was speaking to some women outside the protest on Friday, and there was one who works as an ECE, but she's a supply. She's been trying to get a full-time job for 5 years. So she has no benefits. She's not making a whole lot of money because she works 4 hours a day, but at different times of the day. So she can't get a second job. She works in public housing, and she has barely any money left over after she pays her public housing bill. Is that what we want for an ECE, an early childhood educator who's working with our youngest children? I think there needs to be a really broad discussion about what are these jobs actually worth. The education assistant who's working with children with autism, for example, who sometimes are working with really troubled children who are getting assaulted. We know that. We've been hearing this for a long time. Who are chasing children who are running, who are trying to leave the property. And I know of one that fell and broke her leg. Like, how much are these jobs worth, and are they being paid enough? That is a really big question that needs to be answered.
Catherine, I wonder whether that was part of the calculation to offer the, what am I looking for? Not laurel leaf, but the
olive branch.
Olive branch, thank you. To offer that olive branch, because in fact, these are not teachers making six figures with the best pensions around. Mm-hmm. These are people making on average 40 grand a year. They're overwhelmingly women, and...
Well, yes, you know, but the union did spin this a little bit. A lot of those jobs are part-time. So I think that the average salary is actually higher than that if you take out part-timers.
Okay. Having said that, do they have a more sympathetic access route to the public's ear than, say, teachers might?
I think they definitely do. And it's unfortunate, as Cynthia pointed out, that like the debate, these actual workers and their value to our education system really was not anywhere close to the forefront of the debate at all. And that's unfortunate, and it really got lost. And but I want to just go to something that Allison had said earlier, and look, just because you have a card to play doesn't mean you should play it. And I think that's really the point here. Of
What's
course,
that a reference to?
To the strike notice. Of course, the union has a right to strike, but just because they have that right doesn't mean they should always play that card in the negotiation context. And if you want to have a good faith bargain, you want to get to a deal, it's not going the way you want it to, maybe it's going slow, maybe you're not getting the offers that you want. Blowing up the process by tabling a strike notice is not always going to be the appropriate thing to do. And I think that's what the Ford government was really trying to convey here. A lot of the rhetoric coming from the unions was that, the Ford government walked away from negotiations. That's not accurate. The mediator couldn't get a deal done. Everybody was too far apart. They were at a stalemate. The strike card is a very powerful card to play, obviously, right? When kids are out of school, parents are upset, and they're not just upset at the government. They're upset at the union. They're upset at everything. They just want the situation to be fixed. But that being said, the government can't just back down every single time that card is played, because if they do, it's going to be played all the time in every single situation.
Allison, you want to come back on that?
Well, yes. I think it's important to note that, of course, we are not at the table, right? So, I don't know, and no one who's not really there and who hasn't been living and breathing this for weeks and months really knows all the nuances and the back and forth. Catherine, you yourself say you negotiate, then you know these things. I don't know how much longer the union is supposed to negotiate with no traction. Is it another month? Is it 5 months? Is it 2 years? It's not for us, I don't think, to second guess. But I think it's also important to note that it's a rare thing to use this lightly, largely because unions know that they run the risk of being legislated back to work. So this characterization that unions willy-nilly drop the strike intent every time it's not going their way is fundamentally poppycock. It's a considered decision. It's a thoughtful decision. It's a very hard thing to be on a picket line. I don't know if you've ever been on one, Catherine, but it's a hard thing to be on a picket line. And it's a hard thing to lead a strike. I don't know if you've ever done that either. So it is not a willy-nilly thing that unions do, at least not in this day and age.
Okay, speaking of just because you can doesn't mean you should, that leads me to the notwithstanding clause. Because the reality is, it has been part of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The opportunity to use the notwithstanding clause has been in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms since 1982. But in its wisdom, no previous government of Ontario has ever used it or even mused about using it, threatened to use it, and so on.
Or any other province.
Quebec.
I don't think it's been used. In Quebec, was it used to impose a contract?
Oh, that I don't know.
That's what I mean in a labor dispute.
Oh, I see what
My
you're saying.
apologies.
In a labor dispute. Right, right. So I guess my question is, this is now, I mean, Doug Ford used it, Cynthia, to bring in campaign finance reform.
Yes.
He threatened to use it to overturn a decision about the size of Toronto City Council, ultimately got a better court decision, didn't have to do it. Threatened to use it in this case as well. Again, rescinding for now. I guess the question is, just because you have the power to do something, should you do something? Want to get into some discussion about that?
Well, I think this morning Doug Ford proved maybe not.
I mean, it's there in the Constitution. It's there in the Charter. So some people have said if it's there, you ought to be allowed to use it. Others have said it's not a coincidence that it hasn't been used in the last 36 years. Mm-hmm. Where do you think the preponderance of evidence comes down in this case?
Well, I think with public perception, I think from that poll, if we're going to believe that poll, I think people are uncomfortable with the use of it in this situation. And I think Doug Ford got that message loud and clear, and I think that's why we're seeing what has transpired this morning.
What about it, Catherine? Do you think the circumstances of this situation justified the threatened use of the notwithstanding clause?
Overall, I think the circumstances did justify it. You know, Allison, no, I've never been on a picket line or led a union movement, but I've sat down with a very frustrated, upset 6-year-old and tried to teach her core skills when I'm not a trained teacher, and seeing her be isolated and lonely and crying and missing her friends. And you know, fundamentally, the government has a really important role, which is obviously to protect our public institutions. And at the end of the day, you know, they have to, yes, the core rights are really important that are enshrined in the Charter, but what about the rights of the millions of kids to be in school? And that isn't something to be overlooked. And look, I don't think that the notwithstanding clause should be used lightly. I mean, it is used frequently in Quebec. We do tend to forget that. I think we're probably going to see it used more in the labor context. The right to strike is a relatively new one. It wasn't recognized until 2015. And the reason why we're going to see it more frequently in the labor context is with public sector unions. If there is a strike and there is a shutdown, it impacts millions of people. And there's plenty of people who would argue that education workers are essential service because school and education is essential. So I think we're actually going to see it used more often, hopefully not lightly, but this isn't the end. This is a new time, I think, for labor public sector negotiations.
Well, listen, I think it was Andrew Coyne from the Globe and Mail who said if you leave a loaded gun lying around long enough, someone eventually is going to pick it up and use it. And it may be that for 36 years, no government of Ontario took this path, but this Premier clearly has a different view of it. Is the clause there to be used, in your view?
Not in the case like this. I mean, it's absurd, frankly. And I'll tell you why it's absurd. Because the one thing that I think most commentators can agree upon is that it was not meant to serve every political peccadillo that any government has, then how do you use it in the context of a right that, although, yes, only given constitutional protection in the last 7 years, has been around very much in the same form for almost 80 years. The statutory framework that we have developed over 80 years that allows for the designation of an unlawful strike. And think about that for a moment. We don't have a dictatorship. We don't have a slave economy, but you can be fined for not going to work. That's an unlawful strike. How do you make a strike unlawful in the context of a democracy? Well, you do it because you exchange something for it. And what you exchange for that labor piece, for labor to buy into the fact that they can't just walk off the job every time they're unhappy, that they have to stay there while there's a contract in place, then you give them a means to achieve that decent contract. So what the government wanted here was its quid, but it didn't want to give its quo. And then it's saying, we don't want to say that there should be no right to strike. Like, if he was going to come along here and say, we're getting rid of the Ontario Labour Relations Act, we're getting rid of the Ontario Labour Relations Board, it turns out that all the other provinces actually want to do the same thing. We're gutting the entire statutory framework that we have lived with for 80 years. Well, then come calling and say, and we're going to use the Section 33. But you're going to use it for one particular little labor dispute. And I'm not making light. I'm not at all. I also get, Catherine, the challenges of being a parent in this time. You're going to use it to override and impose a contract, right? To not really to impose it, to insulate yourself from a challenge 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road. Again, this was not about the disruption. They didn't need Section 33 to avoid the disruption in law. You're going to use it for a particular labor dispute. But you're going to say, but we still agree that people should have the right to strike, and we're not going to change the framework. How do you reconcile that use of it with the generally accepted view that it's not supposed to be used for every political peccadillo every time it comes out?
Okay, but all right, Cynthia, let me follow up with you on this one. You know, one of the reasons that premiers were loath to use this is because they thought there would be a political price to pay for doing so, which is why none of the premiers from 1982 until 2018 ever threatened to use the notwithstanding clause. Doug Ford used it in his first term. Mm-hmm. He won more seats when he sought re-election.
That's right.
What lesson do you think he drew from that?
That he was right, that he can do this. And he did. He won a resounding majority the second time round, even bigger than his first one. So yes, I think that empowered him to use this again.
Allison, what about that?
Well, I mean, I think that Cynthia is not entirely wrong, whether or not it was...
Thank you.
I'm sorry if I come across making it sound like I think everybody's wrong. My child has the same complaint about me. But no, I mean, what I'm saying is, I think I've lost my train of thought.
Well, the notion that the lesson Doug Ford would have taken from the last election was, I used the notwithstanding clause and actually won more seats next time out. I didn't get punished, I got rewarded.
Well, people vote based on, I'm sure people in this room can figure a whole bunch of different things, and not all the same thing. In fact, he could have gotten a resounding majority, even if every one of those people, or at least a very large majority of them, wasn't on board for the use of the Section 33. I'm not suggesting that you're wrong about what you said, Cynthia. Yeah, sure, it would empower him, because even if it doesn't indicate that they were on board with it, it certainly would indicate it didn't bother them enough for it not to return him to power. So from that perspective, I think it empowered him to use it again, because he didn't have to pay any price for using it the first time, at least not a long-term price.
I think they were also, if I may, counting on the fact that it's almost 4 years to the next election, and that people will forget by the time they go back to vote.
Indeed. Speaking of paying a price, and Cynthia, maybe you could help us on this, the provisions of Bill 28 suggested that any individual who went on strike was going to be hit with a $4,000 per day fine. So they're out 2 days, so I guess that's $8,000 per person. And the unions themselves, $500,000 a day.
Right.
Now, do we know whether any of those fines have actually been levied, or what's the status of that?
To my knowledge, no. The government, a government person themselves said Doug Ford is not going to go after an individual union worker. That's not the persona that he wants to go after, the little guy, and I say that in air quotes. Right. As for the union, they told me they thought they were going to get a pass on the Friday, and they were expecting perhaps today that they would start seeing some fines. I doubt that's going to happen now because of this somewhat truce. But the union was saying that they weren't going to pay those fines anyways. They were going to fight them in court.
Gotcha. We're down to our last minute here, and Catherine, as you've pointed out, you've done some labor negotiating in the past, so maybe you can look into your crystal ball and divine what happens next. Like, where does this thing go now? This is all fairly unprecedented.
It absolutely is. I mean, so if I were the union, what I would have actually done this morning in accepting the government's proposal is I would have included terms that a deal be struck within a certain timeline. So I wouldn't have left it open-ended. That's my negotiation hat coming on. And Allison, I see you nodding there. Maybe I got your agreement on that. I wouldn't have left it, I wouldn't have left it open-ended. But
you'd have put a deadline on the government.
Yeah, for sure.
You have until, 3 weeks from now, midnight.
Yeah.
Whatever, or else we're back out.
Yeah, because then it puts pressure on the government to really come to the table, and then if they don't get a deal done, then the union can say, well, they had a deadline and they didn't put the work into it. So I think keeping it open-ended, unfortunately, means that it could take a very long time for this to be negotiated. But I think both parties are going to be under a lot of pressure to get a deal done. They're both feeling, I think the government and the union are feeling heat from different angles and different sides of things. And then, of course, parents, I can guarantee you, if you talk to any parent today, the only thing they're going to say is, thank goodness the kids are going back to school. They're not going to be talking about Section 33 and the labor relations.
Well, you know what?
And
It's a good little constitutional history lesson for everybody who's in public school right now.
Yeah.
There we go. All right, I want to thank the three of you for, here's this word. Notwithstanding the differences of opinion you have here, you had a very civilized discussion for which we're grateful. Alison Braley-Ratai, Catherine Marshall, Cynthia Mulligan, great to have all of you on TVO tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks very much.
If you wear a poppy on your lapel in November in remembrance of Canadian veterans and their sacrifices, you may already have some idea about the Royal Canadian Legion. They are the keepers of the poppy campaign. But in towns and cities across Canada, the Legion is often also a physical space, a building, a meeting place, originally just for veterans. And some are struggling to stay afloat. Joining us now on how the Legion is adapting as times change, we welcome, in Gatineau, Quebec, Serge Derflinger, professor of history at the University of Ottawa, specializing in military history and the history of veterans. And in Windsor, Ontario, Tim Copeland, president of Branch 255 of the Royal Canadian Legion and a veteran himself. And we are delighted to welcome both of you to our program tonight. Let's just, for those who are not as up on this issue as you two are, we're going to put a little background in place here. Sheldon, if you would, let's have this graphic up. The Royal Canadian Legion was established in 1925. It's almost 100 years old. At the time, Canada had something like 584,000 World War I vets. It is this country's largest veteran support and community service organization, Legion Halls being their independently run branches. In 1984, they boasted more than 600,000 members. Membership has now dropped to fewer than 250,000, and 75% of them are veterans and their families. But they've since opened up membership to serving soldiers, RCMP and police officers, Coast Guards, and as of 1998, any Canadian citizen 18 and older. There are currently more than 1,300 Legion branches across the country, about a third of them here in the province of Ontario. And as of 2018, 80% of members were over the age of 55. Okay, Serge, let's get into the background here. What was the initial purpose of Canadian Legion Halls to start with?
Well, clearly it was an opportunity for veterans to band together and share common experiences. Their fighting in the trenches or just service during the First World War created a community, and they wanted to establish in their hometowns a sense of commonality. And also because there were so many veterans as a percentage of the male population, military age male population, they also constituted a very big chunk of communities, large and small, across the country.
What were they like in their heyday?
Well, certainly in the 20s and 30s, they were places where veterans could not only be together and reminisce, but they also looked towards the future, how to better their communities or how to fight for greater pension rights or opportunities for veterans, especially during the Great Depression. And then after the Second World War, this whole new generation of veterans picks up the metaphorical torch and then carries it forward to ensure that veterans were in a position not only to be together and support one another, but also maintain their role as pillars of the community and ensure that government did not neglect their needs.
Tim, let's find out more about your situation. When did you join your Legion?
I joined in 1969.
How come?
Well, tradition of my father was a Second World War veteran, D-Day veteran. As a member of the Legion here, he was one of the longest serving members until he passed away. He was a life member. My brother is a Legion member. My grandfathers were Legion members, and I followed in their footsteps.
And how many members did your branch have in 1969 when you joined?
We had nearly 2,000 at that time when
Wow.
I joined.
Okay, and how many today?
We have about 480.
And what do you think of that state of affairs?
Well, it's sad, but it's due to attrition. You know, we only have 5 World War II veterans left in our branch. About 8 Korean vets, a few Afghan, a few other veterans. They're passing away. COVID hit. We were closed for nearly to get those members back. We've reached out to them. We've made phone calls. They're slowly trickling back, but will never be the same.
Serge, when did membership problems, the likes of which Tim has just described, when did they start to become a problem?
Well, it's actually a very interesting question because after the First World War, most veterans did not join the Legion. In the interwar period, we're talking about 75,000 Canadian veterans from more than 500,000. And so it was never all veterans, but certainly there was a gradual increase naturally after the Second World War. And so you don't really notice any significant decline in the veterans population in Legion branches. In fact, very many new Legion branches were added in the post-45 period. So it isn't really until Tim was saying it's really attrition, and the good news is it's also the absence of any significant conflicts in which we were involved. And so it's certainly a bad news, good news situation, and if you look at it that way.
Tim, as you look at your own personal circumstances, do you feel that your branch can hang in there?
Yes, we can. We are doing very well. Since COVID finished, our members are back. We're getting more members in. We have a lot of functions going on in the branch, and the community supports us, and we support the community with our donations to all the different organizations that we support. We're doing okay, and we're working hard. We have a great executive here, and we're even going to get better.
Okay, good to hear. Serge, how about, let me ask you about the one in Verdun, Quebec, which is your hometown. How's it doing?
Yeah, it's my hometown. I was very close to so many of those, the members of the Legion, including veterans, including a handful from the First World War, long departed. So the truth is that number 4 branch, which is a very old branch founded in 1919, and was, I believe, the largest branch in Canada. At one point, I believe, almost 5,000 members. I might be off just a little bit, but enormous. Well, there you have it. They're having financial problems, membership problems. They're now talking about merging with a neighboring branch. It's not clear exactly what type of community or municipal support they're going to obtain, if any. And I think it's also a function of a changing demographic and a changing population base. And the veterans themselves now remain a cogent and discernible group, but small, very small. So I don't know what's going to happen. If number 4 branch has to merge, it'll be a real historic loss to the history of the Legion.
Now, you say it's a demographic change. How is that having an impact on things?
Right. So they're a younger population, a population that is perhaps not as connected to the war. First World War veterans' children are now also pretty old. Second World War children are often retired. And so I just feel that the population is not the same that would be required to maintain the tempo of interest in the community and membership from the community that would otherwise be the case in a successful Legion branch going forward.
Tim, I appreciate the fact that the Legion Hall that you hang out at is doing okay and you feel good about its future. But we heard the last president of the Legion talk about a membership cliff that too many of the places were encountering and heading for danger. That was another expression that was used. How concerned are you that we are going to see branches all across the province of Ontario and the rest of the country start to close down in the years ahead?
I can see that happening. We've had 2 in our city alone that have closed up in the last year. We just had a branch just amalgamate with another, and like I say before, it's the attrition and it's hard to get the young people to come in the Legion. There's a stigma that the Legion Hall is a bunch of old veterans sitting around smoking cigarettes and drinking beer. That's not the case. We have so many young folks coming in, are concerned about the Legion, and they are grandchildren and great-grandchildren of veterans, and that's the people that we're reaching out to. We try to reach out to our young folks in the city, but they seem to have other things that they want to do. The 22-year-olds, the 23-year-olds, they want to go party with their own age groups. They don't want to be coming in where, they're dealing with people that are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and it makes it hard on all of us. But you're right, the Legions are in trouble. A lot of the small towns are in trouble.
Serge, could you follow up on that? Do you think there are some unfair stereotypes out there about what goes on at the Legion Hall?
Oh, undoubtedly. It's pejorative. I mean, these veterans, whether they're from the wars, First, Second, Korea, or any of our other wars, have always, since the beginning, used the Legion as an advocacy place, a place for meeting. And also, the branches are enormously important to their communities. They offer many, many services, and it's also a venue for many activities and events. The notion that being a veteran and a member of the Legion equates to being someone who just likes to hang around on a Saturday, play darts, and drink beer is ludicrous. And it flies not only in the face of reality, but it's a little insulting to our veterans.
Well, tell me this then, Serge. I mean, for example, you talk about the next generation not signing up as much as previous generations. 40,000 Canadians contributed to the war in Afghanistan. What percentage of them do you think have embraced the Legion movement?
So impossible to say. However, I would bet that almost all of those veterans, to a man and woman, support the ideals for which the Legion exists. But it is also true that they are smaller in number and times have changed. They might be some of the demographic to which we've both been noting. Perhaps they are interested in other things. Perhaps technology and the rise of smartphones and technology in many other domains, including social media, might have made it easier for them to stay together in a way that is no longer necessary in a brick and mortar location.
Tim, if I were to walk into the Legion Hall that you have spent so much time at over the years in Windsor, as I walk in that front door, what am I going to see?
You're going to see, if there's people here, you'll be greeted with open arms. We'll shake your hands. We'll invite you in. And we bend over backwards for new people coming in. So if you walk into our branch, you're going to be made to feel welcome.
What about the lighting? What about the amenities? What about the ambiance there? Talk about that, if you would.
Well, we have many things going on here. We have a room for darts. We have dart leagues here on Tuesday nights and Friday nights. We have a pool room where folks come in, they play pool. It's open and it's free of charge at any time. We have, during the week, we have 4 or 5 different seniors groups that come in and play cards. It's bright. It's a cheery place to come in, and it's a fun place. And we have meat draws on Saturday afternoons, and we fill the place, and we have a good time. And Saturday nights, we have a band playing, and they play all kinds of music from the 50s right up through to the today's date. And it's a fun place to come. And you're welcome at any time to walk in the front door.
I'm going to take you up on that sometime, just to let you know.
We'd be more than welcome to have you.
You know what, Tim? We were just in Windsor shooting a show a couple of weeks ago, and unfortunately, I didn't know about this place, and had I known, I definitely would have dropped in. But the next time I'm in town, I'm going to take you up on that. But let me ask you this. Men versus women, what's the ratio of men versus women there?
I'd say we're 50-50. We do very well with both. Yes, we have a great ladies auxiliary, many members there, but we have a lot of female members of the branch.
Okay, Serge, what you've just heard described, how typical is that?
It's certainly my experience. The Verdun branch had its own building. It was unveiled by the Governor General in the early 1930s, the Great War Memorial Hall. It was historic. historic. It was emblematic of a veteran's experience. There was a maquette of the Vimy Memorial. There were historic photographs, and there were wonderful people, many of whom I became very close to, and people I miss a great deal.
Now, you're the professor of history here, so I'm going to ask you this question. If more of these Legion halls shut down, what are we going to lose?
Well, history is about people, and the history of the Canadian people also includes the history of the people at war. And these are a part of the institutional memory of having served in the military, either in peace or in war. And not having that presence in the community means the extinguishing of an important reminder of a part of our history that remains foundational. And so the increasing disappearance of Legion branches is the increasing disappearance of our history.
Tim, can I get you to weigh in on that as well? If we lose more halls, what in effect are we losing?
Cities and small towns, it's the center focus of the town. You're losing a good part of your community because the Legion serves our communities. And unfortunately, if they close, those communities won't be served like they are today.
Is there anything you think could be done to fill that void if more of these halls do shut down?
We as members of the Legion, we've got to get out there and we got to fight to keep them open. We got to bring people in, get programs going to restore some of the older buildings that need repairs. And it's going to be a struggle, but overall, I think we will do well. I think most branches will do well across the country.
You know, Serge, somebody wrote this book, gosh, Putnam was his last name, Bowling Alone, about the sort of disappearance of a certain way of life across, in his case, America. Service clubs disappearing, bowling clubs disappearing. Is this just the inevitable flow of history, or do you think there's anything that can actually be done to save these things?
Yeah, I'll opt for the inevitable flow of history. Times change, people change, activities change. Modernity has a significant impact on how people think and what they do. Many of these things are dated, and newer generations have different habits and different expectations. So for these service groups, which remain very important to so many people, they might need to modernize, they might need to seek a greater sense of relevance in a modern world without necessarily yielding the ideals for which they were originally organized. And so, yes, I think that change is inevitable in this respect.
Well, Serge, I wonder if part of the problem is that other organizations, other newer organizations, have taken up some of the responsibilities that the Legion always felt they had to do. For example, there's Wounded Warriors, there's True Patriot Love. These are groups that are helping veterans. These are groups that are raising money for veterans' causes to help those who are suffering from PTSD and so on. Is part of the problem here that the Legion's place in the military world has been, in some respects, superseded and improved upon by newer and other organizations?
Yeah, it's certainly possible. There is overlap. Many of those organizations are very specific, however. First of all, there are other veterans organizations outside of the Legion. And so the veterans have frequently had their own special interest organizations without necessarily competing with the Legion, and many of them were members of the Legion as well. So it's not inconceivable, nor is it incompatible, that people could be members of more than one organization, and I think that should probably be encouraged.
Tim, how many days a week is the Legion Hall where you go in Windsor? How many days a week is it open with stuff to do?
We're open 7 days a week, and so we have functions going on every day. Now, this weekend, we just did our remembrance service at our cenotaph, and last night we had our remembrance banquet, and we had over 100 people here, and 58 of those were veterans. So we're open 7 days a week, and there's something going on every day.
Of the 58 who were veterans, any sense about what either wars they participated in or what their responsibilities in uniform were?
Well, we had two of our gentlemen in last night. They are 100 years old. We celebrated last month the two of them. They're both Second World War veterans, and The one gentleman is a past president of the branch, and he's a vibrant part of our Legion. And the other gentleman, he's the same. He's 100 years old, and they participate, and we're glad to have them. And the other veterans, a lot of them, they're on the executive here at the branch, and they participate in a lot of the things that go on here. So they are involved.
Serge, let me give you the last word on this.
Well, I was very glad to hear that. In my hometown, the memorial, which is a beautiful, beautiful memorial from the early 20s by a famous sculptor named Coeur de McCarthy. It's a real work of art. Right across the street from the Great War Memorial Hall, and then on the far side is the City Hall. And so the veterans had a pride of place, prominent in the community, and it was impossible for the mayor to look out, to look out his window and not see the Legion and the memorial. And so I always found that to be very important and a real centerpiece historically and today as well.
Wonderful. I'm going to ask our director, Sheldon Osmond. Perfect. That's what I wanted to see. And I don't know if it's possible to get a look at those medals on Tim's chest, but boy, there we go. I love that shot. Love that shot. Tim, thank you very much. Serge, thank you very much. We're grateful to both of you for being on our program tonight and explaining why we need the Legion in the life of our country, in the past, today, and going forward. All good wishes to you both.
Thank you very much.
And that is the agenda for Monday, November 7th, 2022. What if the reason humans aren't taking immediate action on climate change is that our brains just can't comprehend such a vast problem? We'll explore that tomorrow. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.